Hi, everybody. I'm Zilla Blitz, and welcome. Today, I wanted to offer up some impressions of gameplay on Purple Haze from Phalanx. Now, this is a role-playing, tactical combat, choose-your-own-adventure, tabletop war game set in Vietnam, where you control a squad of 6 soldiers over a 9-mission campaign. And there are expansion packs already that expand gameplay for the game as well. Now, a couple of quick caveats. This is not a review. I've spent about 6 hours with the game so far, plenty of which I think I can offer impressions on gameplay. But to really review the game, I think you'd have to go through kind of the full 9-mission campaign and talk about the campaign arc and things like that. But with that being said, I wanted to offer up some overall impressions of gameplay. Overall, I think this game is absolutely outstanding. It is just a very creative combination of role-playing game elements with choose-your-own-adventure and tactical combat. And the three of these just weave together to spin this narrative that has a lot of decision-making and fun decisions within it, and just feels really gritty as you're leading these soldiers through this kind of 9-mission campaign. A number of people mentioned it reminded them of Warfighter, and I can see that, but there's a lot of other things going on in this game that I think really quickly pulls the gameplay away from that game and makes it its own thing. Really like the artwork of the game as well. The language is good, pulls you into the Vietnam mood and atmosphere from the U.S. perspective. The language doesn't pull any punches. The artwork is there with the characters and the soldiers and the maps and the weaponry and stuff. And it just kind of really pulls you in and creates this kind of immersive gameplay experience, with one caveat that I'll mention a little bit later. Let's talk a little bit about gameplay, and we're going to break it down in a moment. But I really love the RPG elements and the story generation and the narrative and the choose-your-own-adventure element is really, really good. The tactical combat is good. I like it. I have a lot to say about that, and I'll talk about it in a little bit. And then the overall management, just the mission management and the campaign management, is really seamless. Rulebook is really sharp and clear. As a learning aid, as a resource, I found the rulebook, sometimes it's a little bit tricky to find what you're looking for. If the thing isn't in the index and it's not in the glossary, then you kind of have to thumb through it. But I have had no questions that the rules or the player aids have not been able to answer. And so as a learning experience and executing the game, I feel like it's been really seamless. I should also say, too, that the gameplay, not only is it fun, it's also forgiving, right? So, if someone dies, you're going to get a replacement in your squad for them. You're going to be able to move this through this campaign, through this 9-mission arc, and really be able to experience the whole game. You're not going to get to, mission 3 and then everybody dies and it's game over. So it's as brutal and as kind of visceral as the game is. It's also, I think, very forgiving, and it allows you to explore its content without feeling like you have to perform to perfection or something like that. So I want to talk about gameplay in 3 parts: the mission and campaign execution, and then the story element, the choose your own adventure kind of mission booklets that are in each one of them. And lastly, the tactical combat, which I have probably the most to say about. Let's start with the mission execution and campaign execution. Again, I really like that system. I love how stamina and the threat levels and time all play together to create these pressures on your decisions as you're trying to get your squad to complete its objectives with safety and then get back to the base before all kinds of bad things happen. So it's this really neat system that just works well. It's so elegantly designed, super easy to execute. The role-playing system that supports it with the squads and their characteristics, I think, is really good as well. I do have one question as to how much of an influence the squad soldiers' attributes have on the campaign overall, because in the first mission, you probably make, I don't think I've made as many as like a half dozen die rolls against their traits on these trait tests. And I really like the trait test system, but I do wonder how often does it come up and how important is it really, the differences in those characteristics in the soldiers? That's more wondering at this point, because I think that answer will unfold as you play the game more and play deeper into the campaign. Let's move over now to the story elements, the kind of choose your own adventure. And basically what happens is you're going to be doing something on the mission map, and it's going to lead to a paragraph in the book, and that book is going to lead to some decisions and some trait tests based on your soldiers' attributes that are going to take your story and your mission in all sorts of different directions. Now, there are 9 of these mission books in the core game, and one of the things that I wondered before I got the game said to myself, okay, you're going to play this once and then you're done, right? You know the mission, you know which way to go. And so what's the point of playing it again? Is it replayable? That's the question I wanted to explore. So to get at that question, I played the first mission 3 times. And I can tell you that my fears about a lack of replayability are unfounded. This game is very, very replayable. I've played the first mission 3 times. Each of the 3 times has been a completely different story. I'm going to tell you how now as a spoiler alert. If you don't want to hear it, it's going to kind of ruin the first mission. So skip over it till the next section. I'm going to talk briefly now about the 3 different outcomes of the missions. A little bit of context. The first mission is basically you're in a helicopter and your helicopter crashes. Your squad of 6 soldiers has one objective: to get back to base, ideally before dark falls. But you've got a number of hours. You've got to hike across some jungle and get back to base. There's a second objective too, which is that there was a second helicopter with you and you think that helicopter might have gone down as well. Can you also, as a second objective, find out the fate of the second helicopter? So first mission, we never found the second helicopter. We didn't get into any combat. We did find the pilot of the second helicopter and accidentally shot him and killed him. And we found a dog that became our pet. Okay. Second mission, didn't find the helicopter, didn't find the pilot. Squad ended up in like this abandoned Vietnamese village where they got attacked by the Vietnamese squad and had this brutal kind of firefight in the middle of the jungle. Then they came back and finally made it back to base with some casualties. Third one, they didn't find the pilot. They didn't get to that village. They found the helicopter. They actually saved a Marine that was nearby at the helicopter, put him on a stretcher, tried to carry him back, but on the way back, he died. And they didn't run into combat. We managed to avoid combat very luckily. But we did get back to like midnight or so. And yes, we found a dog in that one too. So those are the 3 different outcomes, 3 completely different stories from this one mission book. And I feel like I would be fine playing this like a couple more times, even though I kind of have an idea how they're going to go. They can go different ways depending upon the results of your trait tests too. So this narrative ability of the game to spawn narrative is just remarkable. I think it's really good and very replayable, which I'm glad to feel. I want to talk about the tactical combat now. As a precursor, it's really important that I say this. If I were to grade whatever the other elements of the game, I'd give them A's, right? If I am to grade the tactical combat, I give it a B, which means I like it. So I want to say that right up front. I really enjoy the tactical combat. Having said that, there are a number of components of it that leave me wishing a little bit more. And some of it I feel like, well, okay, by the nature of the game, this is the way it's got to be. But let me talk a little bit about the things that I really like with tactical combat. I love the weaponry in there and how the choices and the decisions you're making with targets and the weapons you're using and the initiative system and how you're trying to balance all these things to make your squad perform to the greatest capacity it can in terms of inflicting damage on the enemy. And then also the elements it gives you to try to protect your squad, where you can move them around. You can use hard cover and soft cover and smoke to try to keep your squad mates alive as well. So I really like the decision matrix, and I love the way in particular the weapons work in this system. In particular, also, I do like the North Vietnamese combat execution. It creates a really neat spray of fire that hits your squad. And it's a cool, elegant system for conducting an entire side's firing with one basic mechanic. So I really like those things. On to the things that I'm a little bit less enamored with. The game as a whole, right? It's just the story, the artwork, and the design feels really, really visceral, and it just pulls me into Vietnam. And for someone who's coming at this from a historical gamer perspective, I feel like it just throws you into the situation of being in a jungle, leading a squad through this. And then when you get to tactical combat, it has a layer of abstraction and I think kind of gaminess that kind of makes it hard for me to stay there, right? So the tactical combat for a number, it's on a 12 by 12 grid. So it feels kind of more chess-like and gamey and puzzly. You know, the North Vietnamese soldiers have a 12 by 12 grid and your soldiers have a 12 by 12 grid. And it's line of sight with lines and firing and angles and things like that. So it's a little abstract in how it works. And then secondly, once all the US units have fired and gone through and activated basically in a round, that's it. The combat's over. So it's got this kind of abrupt ending, and now you go back into the conducting your mission and moving forward with it. So altogether, it feels like a little bit more puzzly, cerebral. It pulls me a little bit out of that tactical grittiness of a historical war game and brings me a little bit more into an abstract game. Now, to be fair, two things. One, I think there's a couple of reasons why you have to do it that way. One is that, and this is also my kind of, I think, misunderstanding of what I was thinking of the game was like before I started to play it. First up, the tactical combat can't take 2 hours, right? So you have to keep it short. Otherwise, if you get into tactical combat, your missions could be like 6 hours. And they're trying to keep the missions down to like hour and a half, 2 hour type of experience. The tactical combat overstays its welcome and becomes too big a part of the game. You've completely changed the nature of the gameplay. And that's the kind of adjustment I had to make, is that this is not a tactical combat game set in Vietnam. Each one of these elements, the story elements, the role-playing elements, the mission execution, and the tactical combat is one part of a larger experience. So they had to contain this tactical combat part so that it works within that system and within the time frame they're trying to do. And the second thing is this one tactical map has to serve, dozens of different types of combat situations. And so they have to create a system that in some way, I think, feels a little bit abstract in order to be able to do that. Having said that, I do find myself playing, wishing that it didn't feel quite so abstract as it does. Now, the weaponry doesn't. The weaponry is really gritty and it feels really cool, but it's more the map movement, the 12 by 12 grid, the abrupt nature of the way combat ends that reminds me I'm playing a game rather than immersing me in a tactical combat experience. I also want to talk a little bit about the abstract nature of the design in the tactical combat. So that overall, the whole game is so immersive. It just pulls you into the environment with its language, its design, its color palette. But in the tactical combat, there's a few places where it's like, really? So the cover system, this is the hardcover icon, the hardcover marker in the game, which is basically just a red thing. And this is the soft cover, which is a green thing with like a white dot in it. And it's supposed to represent cover, but it's like, couldn't it be like bushes or something, like something other than this like abstract symbol that kind of you have to translate into cover elements? And also the US soldiers are their symbol and their die roll, their identifier. It'd be so nice if this were a person. Like I really like the North Vietnamese soldier ones where you see a person on it and it reminds you this is a human being. Whereas for the US ones, it's like a symbol. The symbol translates to the person, and altogether it adds to that element of tactical combat that it's a gamey kind of thing rather than gritty tactical combat that you're working with. It's a little thing, again and again, going back to that idea. I like the tactical combat. I just felt like there were some missed opportunities here to really keep you absorbed in that tactical, gritty Vietnam atmosphere. A couple of little places that I've just had feelings about tactical combat. The setup takes a while. So, you're pulling out the soldiers. There's some interpretations you have to make. There might be some conditions that modify it. Whether it's day, different elements modify the setup a little bit. You have to put down hard cover and soft cover. So it's taking me like 10 minutes to set it up. I think I'll get faster on this as I go forward. But at the moment, it takes a while to set up this tactical situation. And then the execution of I really, really like how the North Vietnamese side fire combat is resolved, because it really creates this really cool spray of fire that you honestly don't know where it's going to go. And it just feels like you just got shot at by an entire squad of North Vietnamese soldiers. It's good. It's really, really good. The US one, though, it's a lot of calculation, and you're aimed at one target to get one number. So a lot of times, you got like 8 dice or 6 dice and 2 more dice and then 3 more dice, and then you put them all on the chart and you roll the whole thing out, and then you match them all up and you end up with one number. And it feels like for the US firing, it feels like a bit of a lift to get one number. And you keep wondering, like, would there have been an easier way to do that? And it's not a bad system. And as you do it more often, you get faster at it. But for generating one number, I do wonder, it's like, would there have been an easier way to get that same result with the same type of decision-making matrix? Overall, in the big picture, this is a big game with a ton of moving parts. I really like everything in here. It's just this element of tactical combat that leaves me feeling like it's a B instead of an A for me. And that's one other last thing I'd like to mention. I'm coming at these impressions from the angle of a historical gamer. If you're coming at this game as someone who is more of a general board gamer, I don't think this abstract nature of the tactical combat will probably influence you as much as it does me. I'm coming at it from where I really like the games to feel as a game drifts more abstract, I tend to lose interest in it a little bit more. And this has an element of abstractness in it that doesn't make me lose interest. I still like it, and I like the decision making, but it leaves me feeling like, ooh, could it have been just a little bit more? But there you have it, my impressions of Purple Haze. On the whole, I give this a huge thumbs up. It is really fun to play. I'm not sure I've played a game that has the capacity to generate this type of story and still give you a good decision matrix to operate in. Now, to a certain degree, again, stuff's going to happen with some of your decisions. It's kind of like, I feel like you're almost like a coach of a sports team, right? So you're going to sometimes you can call the right play and make the right decision, but the thing you give the trait test to just messes it up, and your whole mission goes in a direction you were hoping it wasn't going to go. So there is a little bit of like, this stuff is going to happen and it's out of your control. But I do feel like the decisions you're given in the game are a really nice palette of decisions, especially in that tactical combat where you've got a lot of control over what happens in the outcome. The stories feels good enough. You're constantly trying to tip the odds in your favor. And with the little attributes and special abilities that your soldiers have, you're constantly thinking about how to maximize those in your gear and your ammo. So the decision matrix is really rich. The experience and the story the game generates is really, really rich. And overall, this is just an incredibly creative and fantastic addition to the historic tabletop board game family. I'm really, really glad to have had the opportunity to play this, and a big thumbs up from me. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd like to guide you to a couple of other things you might enjoy watching. The top one up there is a playthrough of a mission. It's condensed, but it shows all the major game elements in Purple Haze. And then below that, on the bottom, is a full campaign with Sherman Leader from Danverson Games. It was one of the first replays I made. I think there's like 13 episodes in it. It shows the whole thing is there. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.